But we got number 2 Ohio State at number 3 Oregon, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time on NBC. Technically, by rankings, this is the biggest game of the year. I understand that the brands of Alabama and Georgia are probably bigger, and yes, it was still a top 5 matchup, but this is the first time all year that we have a matchup between 2 top 3 teams in college football, and I'll say it now, even if Texas blows out Oklahoma, I think the winner of this game is probably your new number 1 team in the country next week, right? I would think so. And Texas, by all accounts, could take that back next week if they beat Georgia as well. So it's flip-flops with all these number 1 teams in the country. The winner of this matchup not only will probably be the number 1 team in the country, they'll also take pole position for a spot in the Big Ten championship game. Meanwhile, the loser of this game, you got to worry about Penn State. You got to worry about Indiana. You got to worry about some other teams in the Big Ten as well to get that spot. So I still feel good about both these teams. Even the loser still has a really good chance at making the title game. But you got some other undefeated teams in the Big Ten to worry about. It's not like it's a 2-horse race between Ohio State and Oregon. So biggest game of the year, 2 top 3 teams in the country. The winner of this game is the new number 1 team in the country as well. Dalton, this game is going to be an absolute movie.
First of all, I just love that it's week 7 and you just said you got to worry about Indiana. That's awesome. That's just awesome. I love that. That's how good this year in college football is. Yep. No, absolutely, though. That's the big thing is it feels like the winner of this game is in the Big Ten title game. Right. That's the way it feels because there's not many other games. Obviously, Ohio State still has to play Penn State, still have to play Michigan too. You know how that always goes, but especially lately. But no, I think, and Oregon, I think you got 2 teams out here. Look, I know they're up in the top 3. They're both out to prove something. People have questioned Ohio State's level of competition. I think people at times have questioned Oregon and just their execution level early in the season, and I think rightfully so. I think you have 2 teams really looking to prove both to themselves and everybody else that, okay, we are the best team in the Big Ten, but you have to prove it on the field. This is an interesting matchup, and I don't think these are 2 teams, even though they're in the top 3, they're not without their flaws.
Oh, no.
Sure.
Absolutely not. So, Dawn, you have the Ohio State offense in this game. What should we be looking out for when Will Howard and the Buckeyes have the football?
This is a Chip Kelly offense is what it is.
Chip Kelly revenge game.
Chip Kelly against the Oregon Ducks.
Ooh, I didn't even think about that.
That's the fun.
In Austin?
That's the fun part of this half of this matchup. Chip Kelly and the Ohio State run game. Classic Chip Kelly inside zone, downhill, mauling people between the tackles. Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, especially Judkins. He's having a monster year that we thought he would, right? And I got to love last week. They're playing Iowa. It's a defensive game. Iowa's keeping it tight early. They out-Iowa'd Iowa. That's what they did. Defense, run game. Obviously, Jeremiah Smith's making one-handed catches. But this team, their foundation is Chip Kelly calling run plays between the tackles until the other team quits, right? And this is what's going on right now. Ohio State is 5th in the country in rushing grade, but it's not just the 2 backs. They're 13th in run blocking grade, and they're even better. This interior 3 that they have with Donovan Jackson and Seth McLaughlin in there in the interior they got from Alabama, they're really good on the inside, okay? Yards per carry, 6.5 yards a carry on the season, 7th in the country. Yards before contact per carry, 3.5 yards. The only team in the nation better is Army, and they're just slamming people at the group of 5 level. Best in the Power 5. It's not just the backs. Their offensive line has been terrific this year. That front 5 and the way Chip Kelly's getting them downhill, is it a complicated run game? No, it never has been. But they play with pace. They maul you in this inside zone game, and it's a problem. And I'll be honest with you, this is the weak spot for Oregon. They're 8th in defensive grade as a team, but they're 58th in run D grade. And their interior guys, we've talked about, you've got Derek Harmon on the inside. Jordan Birch off the edge is a really good player. A lot better in the pass rush than they are in run defense. A lot better. Look, their defensive line right now is 95th in the country in run defense grade. This is what Ohio State is going to be in their wheelhouse. Absolutely. They want to run it down Oregon's throat. No question. And on tape, honestly, this is where Oregon has struggled a bit. And they're big guys on this defensive line, but just for whatever reason, it's been a soft spot we even saw it in the very first week against Idaho, right? And obviously, look, your run D grades are going to be a little tilted when you had to play Ashton Jeanty too. Let's throw that out there. That's nobody can defend him, so it's probably a little bit tilted because of that. But they've been even take out an Ashton Jeanty game. It's been kind of average, right? And against this Ohio State run game, you can't be average. They are lethal, especially between the tackles. If they can run downhill, and Chip Kelly's been like this for as long as we've known him, if they can run downhill and they get 6-7 yards every play and play with pace, and then here and there throwing a play action for Will Howard and Smith and Ibuka, that's the formula. And I think Ohio State has every reason to believe that formula can work in this game. They're going to want to get in here and be more physical than Oregon.
Definitely. And I think on the other side of the ball, it's really the same thing as Oregon's offensive line. Can they keep up this recent level of elite play against the Ohio State elite defensive line, right? Oregon entered the year with a top 5 offensive line in the country in my rankings. And during their first couple of games, Dawn, they kind of struggled, right? Against Idaho and Boise State, it's not necessarily the toughest defensive lines in the country. They had a 59.8 offensive line grade in the first couple weeks. That was the 7th worst in the Power 4. But since then, they've really figured it out on the offensive line. Since week 3 specifically, they have a 75.8 offensive line grade that is 8th in the Power 4. But they'll be tested more than ever before this week against Ohio State with one of the best defensive lines in college football. In fact, the Buckeyes have gotten a sack or a hit on 25% of opposing dropbacks this year. That leads the nation. A sack or a hit on a quarter of dropbacks is insane for a defensive line. 6.4% of explosive run rate allowed leads all defenses in the country. So again, 6.4% of carries have gone for 10-plus yards. That's the lowest of any defense in America. And the weakness of the Ducks' offensive line is on the interior, because you got to remember Johnny Cornelius and Josh Kinerly, those are 2 elite tackles, one of the best tackle duos we have in college football. So Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau, very good players, and it'll still be an amazing matchup to watch those two against those two. But I think the Ohio State defensive line has the advantage on the interior in this one. With Ty Hamilton, Tyleik Williams, both of them had 80-plus grades this year. If those two can create havoc up front for Dylan Gabriel and get in his face when he's trying to pass the football and create havoc up front for Jordan James as well, I think the Buckeyes have a really good chance of pulling off the road win. But if not, if you give Dylan Gabriel time with those weapons, and I understand the Oregon weapons haven't played up to their fullest capacity yet this year, but I still think if you give him time back there, that is where Oregon wins this game, honestly. So I think really where this game could come down to is this Oregon offensive line, which has played like an elite offensive line recently, against that Ohio State defensive line, which has played like an elite defensive line the entire season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, this Ohio State defense is square in the argument for best defense in the country. I mean, Jack Sawyer, all those guys on the D-line you mentioned, Lathan Ransom and Caleb Downs at safety is unfair. Denzel Burke at corner. They have NFL talent left and right on their defense. I think Oregon... It's funny because we think of them as being just so explosive, right? All the time last year, constantly explosive, big plays left and right. I honestly, I see 2 issues for me, and the O-line has played better of late. They're struggling to complete deep balls. And outside of 2 balls to Evan Stewart in the Boise State game, I think they're just really struggling to get over the top. And I have to wonder if this game is kept in this 15-yard box that they've been playing in. That works to Ohio State's advantage. If you can't get these safeties off you, Downs and Ransom, that might be the best pair of safeties in the country right now. They're both playing so well. Ransom especially, it's crazy how good he's been this year. The other thing, too, they have to finish drives. And I know obviously they took care of business against Michigan State. They did not finish drives in that game. They struggled so bad. It was 2 interceptions. There was, they're getting all the way down to 4th and goal against Michigan State to finish drives. And I know, look, sometimes Ohio State goes through their lulls too because, we haven't seen Will Howard play elite football yet. But if Oregon doesn't put up touchdowns in this game and they don't finish drives in the red zone or they can't find explosive plays, I think there's real issues for them on offense. I don't think they're completely out of the woods with some of these offensive struggles yet.
No, I don't think so either. So, Dawn, I didn't mention this before, but Penn State going 3 time zones to USC. Ohio State is also doing the same thing. They're traveling 2,500 miles, 3 time zones to Oregon. Will that play a factor? And will Oregon pull off the victory at home? Or will Ohio State win the biggest game of the year? And again, the winner of this game most likely is a new number 1 team in America.
Well, it's that makes it tougher for sure. And not only going across country, but going into Autzen Stadium. That's
it's gonna be rocking.
That's gonna be rocking. That's gonna be fun. But I do think from what I've seen so far, and they always talk about defense and running games travel, right? I'm gonna take Ohio State. I just think what we've seen from them, and we expected both of these teams to be elite teams. I think we've seen elite more often from Ohio State than we've seen from Oregon. I think especially offensively, if you take out the numbers from the Oregon State game and you just look at the other 4, it's been pretty average. It really has not been as explosive as we thought it would be with Dillon Gabriel. I don't know if they need someone new to step up. If you're talking about, Jordan James was really good last week against Michigan State, leaning on the run game a bit. Tough against that defensive line. I think, a key guy I think for Oregon is Trayshawn Holden.
Yeah.
And I know we've talked a lot about Taj Johnson and Evan Stewart, but neither one of those guys has really gotten over the top. It feels like to me Trayshawn Holden has to be a guy maybe once or twice in this game that has to get over the top or make some sort of explosive play for them. The tight ends too are really good. We know Ferguson and Herbert, but there's just too many stretches in this game, in this season, where they're living in that 15-yard box. And it's going to be, if it turns into that sort of game and that sort of grind and physical and run game and 8-yard throws and things, I think that favors Ohio State. I think right now they're a little bit better, and I think you mentioned their defensive line. We talk about, every week a team or two that's in the running for best D-line in the country. This is right up there.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're just so good.
I ranked them number 1 preseason. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know ball.
And you really do, and they're no lower than the top 3. I mean, so you're at least somewhat close. I mean,
yeah.
I like Ohio State. I'll take them 31-28. I think the more physical and kind of in the box that this game gets, it favors Ohio State.
I got Ohio State as well. I was on the fence though, which is why I have it 28-27, 1-point victory for Ohio State. I think the big key was what you just talked about in your breakdown. I think Quinshon Judkins has a huge day against this Oregon run defense, and I think the Ohio State defensive line edges out the Oregon offensive line. That's a heavyweight bout, but I think the Ohio State defensive line I like a little bit more than the Oregon offensive line. But I will say, if this turns into a game, if Quinshon Judkins doesn't have a great day, and this turns into a game where it's Will Howard and his receivers against Dillon Gabriel and his receivers, I give the slight edge to Dillon Gabriel and his receivers than this one. So that's a difference as well. But I think the Buckeyes are going to win a terrific game because of that run game, because of that defensive line. And I think the Buckeyes will win in a close one in what should be an instant classic and what is the biggest game of the year, the first game between top 3 teams this year. And I think Ohio State, after winning this game, will be your new number 1 team in college football.
Last question. How over-under on how many Jeremiah Smith one-handers in this game?
It's a weekly occurrence now. It's got to be at least 1.
You think so? Would you put 1.5, you think? You think he's got
1.5?
He's got 2 in him this week again?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. He did against Iowa, which is like, oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
did you see, after he made that one-hander against Iowa, Sebastian Castro, who was not the one he was covering on the play, but Sebastian Castro after the play was like clapping, like... Game recognized game.
What do you do?
Yeah,
I mean, you can't defend that. I mean, I'm just now it's just a show with him alone at this point when he gets a chance to do that. It's crazy how good he is.
Yep. So we're both taking Ohio State and what should be an amazing, amazing game.